Welcome to OState Daily. Casey Porter here. So glad that you decided to tune in. Fans, today we have a very, very, very special guest. Derek Smith joins us. Derek is the play-by-play voice of the women's basketball team there at Baylor that has been so good throughout the years, and then also for baseball. So super excited to get to catch up with him during baseball season as well. Also the host of the pre- and post-game shows for Baylor football and a lot more. So Derek, this is a wonderful honor to get to speak with you. Hopefully it's the first time of many, so thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely. Likewise, Casey. Great to be on with you today. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's jump right in, and let's talk about the Baylor Bears coming off of a 3-win season, which is kind of a shock to all of our systems, right? As great as Baylor has always been throughout the years. They did have that period, about 20 years ago where they struggled, but 3-4 so far this season. So what is the temperature like around Waco right now?
Well, honestly, Casey, coming off of the win over Texas Tech, it's at about as high as it's been in a while. That snapped an 8-game Big 12 losing streak for this team. And obviously, when you say the words 8-game Big 12 losing streak, things haven't been where anyone involved with the program want them to be. I think fans are excited for this weekend. It's homecoming, which always brings added crowd. And finally, just coming off of a win, and a decisive win like it was against Texas Tech on the road, that's got fans excited. And I think for Baylor, it's an opportunity to try to build some momentum late in the year. I mean, obviously, it's been a little bit since Baylor's been on a winning streak, and right now it's just one. Baylor would like to build on that and really try to get some fan enthusiasm toward a bowl push. I think because of the struggles the last couple of years, fans have been checked out more than usual. Some of our games haven't been as well attended, and I think it's just been frustrating for the fans. I know it's been frustrating for the players, but there's an opportunity here. It's not going to be easy this weekend against an Oklahoma State team that I think are going to see their best effort. But for Baylor, I think you're trying to build towards a bowl appearance and really try to build some fan enthusiasm for this last month towards that push.
Well, I'll tell you what, last week was just absolutely incredible. 59 points, 255 yards on the ground. I mean, where did this come from?
That's a great question. Baylor had been averaging 3.8 yards per carry the first 6 games of the year, and the next thing you know, it was almost 8 yards per carry against Texas Tech. The best all-around game between the backs, quarterbacks, running backs, and offensive line that we've seen in some time. I think Texas Tech has struggled a little bit, so they've allowed teams to do that. I mean, that was, I think, 255 yards was a little bit above the pale, but Tech had struggled a little bit, so you hoped Baylor could take advantage, and they did. So I think you got to look at the offensive line for a good part of that. They've been steadily improving. It's not the most talented line Baylor's had, but last week they didn't allow a tackle for loss. Back-to-back weeks they haven't allowed a sack, and I think you kind of start there, and then you just saw some good synergy. I think Sawyer Robertson is really talented, and when he's got a good running game behind him like we saw against Tech, they really feed off of each other.
And it's been a good offense all year. I mean, it's 4th in the Big 12 in points per game with 32 points a game. So it's not like Baylor hasn't had a good offense all year.
That's true. And it's been, it's interesting because, DeQuan Finn started the season at quarterback, a transfer from Toledo. He was considered one of the better players available in the portal this past offseason. He came in and had an okay game against Tarleton, then got hurt against Utah. He really struggled against that Utah defense, which a lot of quarterbacks would struggle against that Utah defense. But he struggled. He was hurt. Sawyer stepped in, and he's played well enough that you can't take him out. And I think what we've seen, Casey, is Sawyer is much improved. He was hurt a lot of last year, too, which probably played a role in some of the struggles. But he's improving game by game. The running game, if it is just solid, I think it really sets the offense up for success. And then the passing game has been really, really good. I think Baylor's added a couple of good transfers in Ashton Hawkins, a wide receiver from Texas State, Michael Trigg, a tight end from Ole Miss. And so you've got some weapons. There's not just that one guy. Both of our schools have had that guy at times, right? A Des Bryant or a Corey Coleman or whomever. There's not the one guy, but there's a lot of guys who are really solid out there. And I think that plays into, there's just about always someone open or someone that you feel like you can throw a 50-50 ball to and see if they can make a play.
That's a big one, too, in Oklahoma State's offense, that 50-50 ball, especially on third downs. Very intrigued by Sawyer Robertson. You mentioned him, the quarterback for Baylor. A completion percentage around 60%. He has a quarterback rating approaching 150, which is very good. He has a touchdown to interception ratio almost 5-1. So this is a young man that is playing good football for Baylor, it seems like.
He just keeps stepping up week by week. And I think we knew when he transferred in from Mississippi State last year that he was talented, that we had a good young player. You know, he didn't beat out Blake Shapen in a preseason quarterback battle. And this year he didn't beat out DeQuan Finn in a preseason quarterback battle. And what's interesting, I think it's easy to look and say, well, you know, DeQuan Finn was the big offseason pickup. Of course, he's going to win the job. But the reality was, from talking to people, it didn't sound like Sawyer Robertson had a particularly consistent camp. You saw flashes of his talent that he showed at Lubbock's Coronado High School, where he's one of the all-time leading passers in Texas high school football. But maybe he's just a gamer. You know, that might be a little bit. Maybe when he's in command, that brings something out of him. There were games where I think, you know, you look at our close losses to Colorado and BYU. In a lot of ways, he was the entirety of the offense. And even look at the running totals in a couple of those games. You're talking about, you know, maybe 70 some yards, and he had 50 of them. He was doing it all by himself, him and the wide receivers. And he was showing a lot of moxie. He was showing good leadership, and he was showing an ability not to let tough situations get to him. You know, even in Colorado, after we gave up that Hail Mary, on the last play of the game, he actually had the team at the cup of the goal line in overtime and looked calm and poised. And he also hasn't allowed those close losses seemingly to get to him, which I think as a fan, you've got to love. He just got a lot of toughness. He seems like he's, you know, he's just got a lot of ability to stand in there. And not only that, he's talented. 5 touchdowns last week against Texas Tech. First time we've had a quarterback do that since Seth Russell in 2015. So it had been a minute. And one other thought, Casey, he's a great fit for Jake Spavital's spread offense. Baylor brought back the spread this year. He played something similar in high school, and he's just comfortable. He's just comfortable in that offense, and he's shown he's capable of keeping you in games all by himself. Now, obviously, the hope as we get further into the second half of the season, he's got more of a running game to provide a little help.
Jake Spavital's been just about everywhere in coaching. Yeah. Great offensive coach. Really got that Texas State program rocking and rolling. They still are just doing a great job down there in San Marcos. But, hey, the rushing attack, it doesn't seem like any one player really sticks out. Talking about Bryson Washington, Dawson Pendergrass, and Richard Reese, kind of a three-headed monster there. Plus, then you throw in a little bit of quarterback run game. So it's a run game that hasn't been great, but it seems like it's getting better. Would that be a good way to describe it?
It is. And, you know, obviously from the Baylor standpoint, we're hoping that that's very true. You know, I think we'll start seeing these next couple of games is what we saw last week against Texas Tech. Was that an anomaly, or was that a sign of things to come? You know, and hopefully it is a sign of things to come, because Bryson Washington, you know, he's a young guy who, you know, it's funny. None of us had really seen much of him. You know, he was hurt last year. He didn't play a lot early in the year as he was continuing to nurse injuries. But, you know, you can just tell when you're head coach, when there's something about a kid that he can't stop talking about. That was Coach Aranda with Bryson Washington. And we've seen some glimpses of it. Against Air Force, he was over 100 yards. I mean, last week against Texas Tech, he set that tone early. He ripped off a big 45-yard run, punched in a couple of short touchdowns. And, you know, you can kind of see why Coach Aranda is excited about it. Now, he's got to put it together consistently. And I think that's what we want to see heading into the second half of the season. But there is a good stable behind him, as you said. Richard Reese, you know, he was a all-freshman performer 2 years ago. Now he's battled some injuries, some inconsistency, but he's got a lot of speed. He's shifty. You know, if he gets out in the open field, he can be hard to bring down. And then Dawson Pendergrass is just kind of one of those guys who always falls forward. He is, you know, he's not going to necessarily have a huge stat line all the time, but he's a guy on, you know, 3rd and 1 you want to hand the ball to, because he's going to find a way to fall forward. A small town kid who just kind of brings that mentality.
Well, you mentioned the receiving room, how it's spread out so well, which makes it so difficult to defend if you don't know exactly who to key on. I think you could maybe say that Josh Cameron has been at least somewhat the headliner of that group, but you mentioned how they've all come together. But I think it's strength in numbers with this receiving core with Baylor. Would that be accurate at all?
That's true. That's true. And you mentioned Josh Cameron, and he really has become a leader. He's a former walk-on who has really done well in any role Baylor has asked of him, punt returning. We saw him get some spot duty at times the last couple of years, but he has shown the work he's put in. I mean, he's another one of those guys the coaches just rave about. He's just one of those glue guys. And 7 touchdowns this year already, which puts him up near the top of the Big 12, plus a punt return for a touchdown, so 8 total. He really is a guy that the team looks to in a lot of ways, but as you said, a lot of talent around him with Ashton Hawkins. You know, he had, I think, 6 catches last week against Texas Tech. You've got Hal Presley, a transfer from Auburn who's battled some injuries but has shown himself to be a very reliable receiver. And you know, kind of tying this into that first question you asked, sort of about the vibe a little bit. You know, it's funny. Last year, the team not only struggled win and loss wise, but I think the fans felt in a lot of ways it just, wasn't a lot of fun to even watch. Yeah. The offense could get stagnant. It was hard to see them move the football. And, so last year there were only 5 touchdown passes to wide receivers all year.
Oh, wow.
Well, all year. Yep. So this year you've got 5 wide receivers who have at least 2 touchdowns. And of course, Josh Cameron has 7 all by himself. What you've seen is an offense that's potentially more explosive. Monterey Baldwin's another guy I failed to mention. He's the speed guy. He's the guy who might only have 2 or 3 catches, but don't let him get behind you or don't let him put a move on you, because it might be, 3 catches for 100+ yards. He's that kind of guy. But what you've seen is an offense that's more explosive and I think just more fun for fans. There's a lot of weapons out there, and they really put it together last week. It was the highest point total of Coach Aranda's time here at Baylor against a Big 12 team. And so there's more weapons. It's more fun. And as the schedule, I think when you look at November, it's always looked like on paper, it's not easy, but it's certainly easier than playing, a BYU, a Utah on the road, Colorado, et cetera. So Iowa State. So the hope is that they continue putting it together and build towards a bowl game and, really kind of build towards setting a foundation for Jake Spavital's offense here long term.
I'm tabbing this as the time of possession bowl, or lack thereof. Baylor, one of the things they haven't done well is possess the football. They're 15th in the Big 12 in time of possession, in front of only, you guessed it, Oklahoma State. So,
yeah.
Hey, take us through what has been the issue.
Someone's got to win.
Yeah, somebody's got to win that, right? What's been the issue with holding on to the ball?
I think there's been a couple of things. One, now, obviously, it was better this past week against Texas Tech because you could run the football. In the games in which we didn't, and there were some good defenses in there. Utah, Iowa State, those are good defenses, but there were a lot of 2nd down and 9s, a lot of 3rd down and longs, and Sawyer Robertson's a talented quarterback, but obviously the percentages go way down in those situations. And there were some games, I think the Colorado game, I think there were about 7 3-and-outs. There's been some games where we've either had an explosive play or a couple of explosive drives, but we have also had a lot of 3-and-outs, a lot of short drives. There was a game, Air Force fumbled the football 3 times in the first half. And so there's been some things that have probably depressed that number, but I think the big thing is, playing ahead of the sticks a little bit, playing ahead of the chains. Can you get it to 2nd down? Is the running game good enough to make it 2nd down and 6, 3rd down and short rather than 3rd down and long? And I think that's going to be a key for Baylor in every game we play the rest of the way.
All right, the Baylor defense, let's flip sides of the ball. 10th in the Big 12 in scoring. Just kind of give us a general Walmart version of this Baylor defense.
Yeah, well, the biggest change this year has been the fact that Coach Aranda has taken over the defense. He is serving as head coach and defensive coordinator. That's a defensive coordinator. Had a lot of success, won a national title at LSU. He was a great defensive coordinator at Wisconsin. That's his bread and butter. So, of course, it stands out when the team's not very good defensively, which it was not last year, 13th in the Big 12. And so obviously improvement needed to take place. He's come in, and I think what you've seen overall, maybe save for the Iowa State game, you've seen guys in better position to make plays. You've seen more pressure. There's been a couple of grad transfers that have brought that. And it's also helped because that's a young secondary. So I think we might talk about it a little bit later. It's a young secondary that needs some, you don't want to put them on an island, right? Last year, man, our defensive backs were on an island, and that young group made some plays, but they were exposed at times. Well, this year there's been more pressure. Overall, just a better job of, trying to play a little bit ahead of the sticks, the opposite of what we're just talking about on offense. And his fingerprints have been seen on the defense. And I would say really all but the Iowa State game as a notable exception. I think overall the defense has played substantially better and obviously good enough to win some football games.
Matt Jones, my kind of guy at linebacker, seventh-year senior. He's a tough guy there out of Odessa, one of the Permian program that is one of the most successful programs high school-wise ever in the history of high school football. Then you got Keaton Thomas, the young redshirt sophomore out of Florida. So the linebacker crew looks very good experience, but then also some youth and some good athletic ability.
Yeah, they do. And, Matt is a leader. You mentioned Odessa Permian, a Friday Night Lights guy. I mean, you got to kind of love a little something about that. And he's been a guy who has had some ups and downs, but he has matured. And when I say ups and downs, it just means, he hasn't just stepped right in, always had great success, but he's become a leader. He's become a guy who you can really rely on. And I mean, linebacker, you're talking about the quarterback and the defense. He's done a good job. He and really Keaton Thomas too have done a good job providing that leadership. Keaton Thomas has been a nice addition, a tough guy. The JUCO transfer, he started off college football playing safety, so he's got a little bit of that hard-hitting athleticism in that spot. And they've done a nice job settling things down in the middle for us. I think that was an area that really struggled last year, and they've done a good job settling things down where you don't feel like, if the defensive line isn't able to make a play, that secondary is going to be one-on-one, with a great running back or, someone making a catch across the middle.
Yeah. Baylor defensive line's interesting to me. It seems like they do really well moving forward, like in a pass rush situation. Not quite as good in stalemate situations like maybe trying to stop the run. So they've been very good in pass rush, not as good in the run game. Take us through the defensive line for Baylor.
Yeah, and they have done better, like you said, on the pass rush. I think we've seen some improvement. Last week, Taj Brooks, he had over 100 yards, but they didn't let him control the game, which was big. I mean, obviously, you play Texas Tech. If Taj Brooks beats you, you're not going to find a way to win the game. And Baylor did a good job of managing him. And I think what you've got in particular are a couple of guys who have either matured or come back from injury. One is Jackie Marshall. He's a redshirt junior who missed last year. Big guy in the middle, number 0. You'll notice him. He's weighs over 300 pounds with a 0 on his back. He's been very solid. He's not, you're not looking at him and saying, hey, these are some of the best defensive linemen dominant in the Big 12, but they've been good. And that's been an improvement. Marshall's been a piece of that. And then a guy named Trevin Maai, a transfer from Oregon. He's been a leader on this defense, and he stepped up and made some big plays. And even just to add a couple of pieces to that, with Baylor's defense, the jack position, which is a little bit of a roving position that is a blend of linebacker and defensive lineman. Garmin Randolph, the big 6'8" pass rusher, has made some plays this year. And a guy named Steve Linton, transfer from Texas Tech, who was a good pass rusher for them last year, has been big. They've really provided the pass rush. And I think what we've seen is the defensive line has been good enough to occupy opposing offensive lines where the guys behind them have had an opportunity to make more plays.
Oh, very well. Very well. I think the best way that you could put the secondary, talking to you earlier, was that the Baylor secondary is getting better and they are very young, lots of youth.
Yeah, that's true. And even, we saw that last year. I think you tried to look at the glass half full of, hey, these are guys who are freshmen, some cases true freshmen who don't have a lot of playing experience. I mean, they're getting burned at times, but they're also holding their own at times, the Big 12, there's a lot of great receivers. Yeah, they're gonna get theirs at times. Can you can you be competitive? And they showed signs of that. This year, they've done even more so. I think, a couple exceptions. I mean, obviously, Travis Hunter had some big catches. Colorado, they gave up some big plays but there's some NFL guys on that roster. Certainly a Jalen Noel, at Iowa State, against some guys who are going to be playing on Sundays soon. Those guys have had some good games, but across the board, they've shown improvement. I mean, obviously, Baylor's record is 3-4, so it's not as if they've been dominant by any stretch, but they've shown improvement. I think Caden Jenkins, a guy to watch. He missed a number of games with an injury this year, but he came back last week and had a key interception against Texas Tech. Devin Bobby has been very solid as a safety for the Bears. Devin Lemire. And, they got a transfer who actually started his career at Baylor, went to Arkansas and came back. Lorando Johnson, he's been good. He's battled some injuries, but has been solid. And a couple other guys behind him, Tevin Williams has stepped in. It's kind of been a committee approach, but for the most part, it's worked. And from a Baylor standpoint, you're hopeful that with this experience, they just keep, getting better and better. And maybe you look next year, you're talking about a secondary that could actually turn some heads.
Right. Derek Smith, play-by-play voice of Baylor women's basketball, also with baseball, is also the host of both the pregame and postgame show of Baylor football. Derek, it's been such a wonderful honor to get to speak with you. I'm going to put you on the spot as we get out of here. Okay, it's going to be a two-part question. Baylor defeats Oklahoma State if, and then Oklahoma State goes on the road and defeats Baylor if. Two-part question.
Yeah, I think for Baylor, you want to establish enough of a running game that you make that you avoid being one-dimensional and make Oklahoma State's defense, which I know that defense is dealing with. I mean, just some absolute all-stars who are unavailable due to injury. It would look very different if they were available. But if Baylor is able to be two-dimensional on offense enough that you can kind of put Oklahoma State back on their heels a little bit, I think that favors well. And if you can try to conversely, make Oklahoma State more one-dimensional, try to put it all on Alan Bowman's shoulders and, put it on his shoulders. Conversely, I would say, it's funny, Oklahoma State with that 0-4 record in Big 12. I mean, I know Cowboy fans are probably pulling their hair out. Man, the rest of the Big 12 still very much respects y'all. I think it's a proud program, and I don't think anyone thinks there's going to be a 0 in that win column in Big 12 play, or even, probably going to be a crooked number in there. At least that's the kind of respect most fans have for Oklahoma State's program. And I think if Oklahoma State, I'll say this, a key for both teams would be trying to jump out to a lead early. Baylor has not necessarily done a good job of coming all the way back from early 2-score deficits. Conversely, if Baylor could open up a 2-score, an early 2-score lead, I think you kind of put Oklahoma State on their heels a little bit. I think if Oklahoma State can be two-dimensional, and that's a big key for them. And I think probably, and I would say this for anyone on there, I think on the road, you need kind of a big game-changing play somewhere. A red zone turnover, forcing a red zone turnover, a long punt return, something like that. I think if Oklahoma State gets a game-changing play or two, and if Gordon can, that running game can kind of establish itself, I think that would go a long way towards Oklahoma State getting that win. And I know you've got that bowl streak going. I know everyone wants to keep it. I know we're trying to get back to a bowl. I think it's going to be a fun game with two programs whose record isn't where either of them want it to be, but who can come out and bring that effort? We'll see.
Derek, we mentioned that you are the play-by-play for Baylor women's basketball, also Baylor baseball. You host the pre- and post-game shows. So where can we find all your stuff?
Yeah, if you go to BaylorBears.com, you can listen into the broadcast. All of them are, football. All of our broadcasts, you can find them there. And, yeah, if Oklahoma State fans want to tune in here, another Big 12 broadcast, we would be more than honored. And I will be seeing you in baseball and women's basketball here, and men's basketball too, which I don't broadcast myself. But it's going to be some big games ahead. Looking forward to those.
Derek Smith, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Casey.